members. The meeting will be recorded and ask members to note that all mobile phones should be switched off as they interfere with the recording. I also remind members where appropriate to decline interest as we proceed through this morning's business. Apologies from Chris Hazard and Trevor Lunn. Just a few items, members, that I want to run through briefly, and then we'll come on to matters arising, which is a follow-on from yesterday's meeting. Primary area plans. You'll notice that there has been the publication of area plans in relation to primary school, and the clerk emailed us the relevant links on Monday. The Western Education Library Board plan indicates that where schools are above the 105 or the 140 pupil threshold, the managing authority will propose no change at this time. The Western Education Board's plan also indicates that if a school is below 105 pupil threshold, further consideration will be undertaken. Where the school has 86 or more pupils and 4 or more teachers, annual consideration will be given to the attention of the school if it is geographically isolated and plays an important role in the community. Where the school has less than 86 and 3 teachers, consideration will be given to the reorganisation, including amalgamation, federation leading to a 4-teacher school with limited pupil travel time. Or where the school has less than 86 and 2 teachers, a review will be undertaken, but the baseline case will be closure unless a viable amalgamation option is devised. The other ELB's plans phrase the new criteria a little differently. The plans appear to include only for a very few amalgamations closure proposals. The Belfast Board plan has not even yet been published. So the Western Board plan makes reference to supporting all of the Fermanagh Trust shared education partnerships, and we've received correspondence from the Fermanagh Trust in relation to that. And in tabled items, we have the correspondence from the Trust. The North Eastern Board plan makes reference to working with NICE to determine demand for integrated education. So I would propose that we seek a briefing from our special advisor, the ALBs and the department in September. Obviously I refer to Professor Tony Gallagher in relation to that. Great. Eason's Spelling Bee competition. At the weekend, the Belfast primary pupil, Amelia McDowell, won the All-Ireland Easton Spelling Bee competition, and I would suggest that we write to Amelia and congratulate her. She is a pupil at St Teresa's of Lisieux in North Belfast, and I would wish her every success and congratulations on what was a very, very well done achievement. Okay.
Yep.
Teacher statistics. The department has recently published statistics on teachers, and this includes information on absence. For example, around 2/3 of teacher absence is over 20 days. Teacher absence is higher in Catholic maintained and special schools. And the statistics also show that teacher substitution costs have increased by 5 million to 65 million in 13-14. Also, although the percentage of submission or substitution days covered by recently retired teachers has reduced a little from 4.4 to 3.8, the actual number of days covered by these teachers has increased from 412k in 11-12 to 433k in 12-13, and for 13-14 to 447,000. So I'd suggest that we write to the department seeking clarity on the actions it's taken to reduce the costs associated with the teacher substitution and to provide opportunities in this regard to newly qualified teachers. Agreed?
You mean in that, Chair, asking for why it's so high as well?
Yes.
Right? Yeah.
Okay. And then we had the Dale report on the teacher education infrastructure. The Dale Minister yesterday launched the report on the review of initial teacher education infrastructure. I proposed to meet informally with the member of the international panel. In fact, yesterday the Minister spoke to me after the announcement and introduced me to one of the members of the panel who plans to be back in Northern Ireland over the summer, and I agreed that I would meet with the panel representative. If members are happy that we do that over the summer.
Can I come with you?
Yes.
Around?
Yep. Agreed. Okay, so we'll get a suitable date. Okay, the draft minutes of the previous meeting, which is 25th of June, pages 9 to 16 of the pack. Agreed?
Yeah.
Okay. Then just matters arising before we move on. The issue of teacher redundancies, and members, this took up some time yesterday because it is an issue which is of a very serious nature. And I have to say, I notice with some degree of concern that the Permanent Secretary of the Department of Education's time seems to be better spent going to meetings associated with other issues. I have to say, as Chair of the Education Committee, I am disappointed that the Permanent Secretary can find time to go and chair talks about talks or whatever it is that they're going to discuss, while there are crises within education which remain unresolved. And I say it as clearly as I can, his time would be better spent in the department and in Rathgael rather than dealing with the issue of flags and the past. So I think it's regrettable that that is the case. However, that's a decision that others have made. But I think that at some stage, members, we need to ask the Permanent Secretary, because he hasn't been at this committee for some considerable period of time. In fact, the last time he came, he brought with him another Permanent Secretary and another department and deflected all the questions to them. So I would suggest that we would ask the Permanent Secretary early in September to come with the senior management team of the department in front of this committee, because I am becoming increasingly concerned about a disconnect between what goes on in Rathgael, the policies and the way in things that are implemented. But following the briefing from the department on the teachers' redundancy yesterday, there are a number of things that I think we need to clarify urgently from the department. First of all, I think welcome the variation to the financial scrutiny criteria for teacher redundancy, but ask the department that it considers a further extension to the criteria to recognise the medium-term financial situation.
So, Chair, what that means is what the department's done is the original criteria for teacher redundancy were about schools facing a challenging financial situation. The department, I think, varied that criteria to indicate if the schools were facing a financial or expected to face a challenging financial situation by 31st of March 2015. The committee might take the view that maybe the department should be a wee bit more liberal with that and look at it over a slightly longer time period, given that schools do plan over more than a single year.
Okay.
Did they, on my question, did they? Sorry.
No, Chair, just as part of that, I find this very interesting because you do your 3-year plan, and to try and keep yourself in the black, part of that 3-year plan is actually planning out hateful but redundancies. That's all part of your 3-year plan. Yet, if you're sitting in a surplus position, but the trend is by the end of the 3 years you're almost zero, you're still being turned down and refused redundancies at this point in time. So the 3-year plan becomes meaningless because you can't actually implement the 3-year plan.
And an issue in relation to the 3-year plan. Does the 3-year plan or 3-year plans, do they all run concurrent? I.e., is the 3-year plan the same for School A and School B? And does the department, where does the department align the 3-year plan? Because sometimes these things can happen in the midst of a 3-year plan. So the cycle of the 3-year plan could be in different places at different times in different schools.
I think, Chair, that we could seek clarity from the department, but I think it's like a rolling 3 years, so they're always planning 3 years. Like a lot of businesses
Right,
would
yes,
do. I
yeah,
think that's
okay.
what they have in mind. Sorry, I think Sean.
Sure.
It's basically the same point. I think we need clarification. To the best of my knowledge, I think this savings delivery was based on the March 14 figures rather than planning ahead in terms of savings in March 15 or March 16. But we really need clarification on that.
Indeed, Chair. That was, I think, the committee's understanding, but I think what Laverne indicated yesterday was that they had varied the criteria, and now they were talking about 31st of March 2015. But clarity sought, I think this is what the department's asking.
Because it's a very, very important factor, because, you know, how can you, that part of the plan, how can you plan ahead for savings if we're looking backwards, March 14?
Danny, is your point on that or another?
It is on that.
Yes, okay, go ahead.
Isla had to leave earlier, and I hadn't seen any indication they were going to vary at all. So we did get somewhere with them, did we, to varying the criteria? Or are we
Well,
asking?
what they've said is they've varied the criteria. When I asked the question, has this process ever been used in the past? And the answer was yes. In fact, they've now clarified for us that the 58 million, which released 450 teachers, was on the basis of a similar process. But during that period of time, there have been changes to the criteria. So what I can't now understand is, if they made changes to it this time, why we ended up in such a fundamental shambles in terms of how it was actually implemented. And I think that's why we want to have that clarity in relation to that element of it. The other issue was to ask the department urgently to clarify the situation for the 91 cohort of teachers who are definitely not complying with the criteria.
Some of whom are definitely not compliant with the
Yes.
criteria. Sorry,
Yes.
that was what they said.
So we need to clarify that urgently with the department. Ask the department to set out the timescale by which all teachers in the 91 cohort will know the position in respect to their application for redundancy. Ask the department to identify the schools in the 91 cohort, because
I'll give you one of them.
well, I know of one of them, and I think we do not want to identify individuals, but we need to identify schools. Simple reason. Because it will be schools who will end up, one school in particular that was referred to yesterday, who will end up in a very dire financial position in terms of if it's not implemented as agreed with the board. So I think it would be useful to know the schools, even if it's given to us in confidence and not for public consumption. I think that we should put that caveat just in case, because obviously we don't want to create an undue concern around schools because of information that we would put into the public domain. Ask the department also to set out the lessons learned and the actions for the future in respect of the communication and administration of redundancies. Like, I think it was telling yesterday, members, whenever you had quotes from Laverne like misunderstanding or raising expectation, or at one stage when it was referred to as jumping the gun. Well, I just think it's clear that this has been very, very badly handled between all those who are involved in it. Also, ask the department to provide copies of relevant correspondence to teachers, schools, managing authorities sent out in April, May and June. And also ask the department to explain the 2-year payback criteria, because I think that covers a considerable number of the issues that was raised. Danny?
When asking for the copies, Chair, are we also asking for the library board's
Yes,
letters?
yes, because that will be relevant correspondence to teachers, schools, managing authorities.
I think we need the whole
Yes.
route all the way. Yeah.
Okay. We also received correspondence from a distraught teacher affected by teacher redundancy issues, and I propose that we forward the correspondence to the Minister for his information. To school in East Londonderry. Okay. Any other issues in relation to that, Sean?
Yeah, we need to see where this fits into Northern Ireland PLC as well on the overall picture, because you have schools who have been very innovative in terms of their planning ahead. Maybe 2 teachers who are quite mature in their age, and they see opportunities, for example, to employ a younger member who, as well as teaching that subject, could bring in a subject like software development and whatever else. We have 4 young teacher graduates in Queen's sitting with this qualification in terms of software development and that whole area that's drastically needed in this part of the world, who can't get jobs. We've places like First Derivatives yesterday, more jobs again. When schools have been innovative in terms of how they move ahead, how is the department actually looking at the overall picture in terms of being innovative of the needs of our economy as we move ahead? Maybe it's a general point, but I think it's still a very important point.
Okay, moving on then, members. So it may be that on the basis of that, members, if we do get further information, we shouldn't rule out the possibility that this committee would be recalled over the summer. Because I think that we need, in terms of this issue, this is an important issue, and if needs be, we don't get satisfactory answers, then I'd be more than happy to recall the committee over the summer because we can't allow this to just drundle on until September, and then, as we always do, then we hope that it has gone away. We've seen problems like this in the past, and the summer won't diminish this problem, because schools are meeting today to discuss, to decide what they're doing when they go back in September.
No, and Chair, if this rolls on to July monitoring round, or rolls
Yes.
on, and schools are making a decision at the end of August, they still have a contractual agreement to those people to keep them probably up to 4 months, and the consequences of that for budget for next
There
year.
still is the rumour in the system that the Assembly will be recalled next Wednesday in regards to the monitoring round. So if that is the case, then it may be that the committee has to meet then after that to see what the impact of that decision is. So I think we should keep that as an option open for ourselves, because I think we need to give confidence to teachers that we're not, if you listen to UTV last night, we've basically packed up shop and gone home our spades and buckets, and we're away to the sea, and we're just going to have a real jolly over the summer. I think they forgot that there's work going on here today, and we will be working over the summer, and I'll certainly, and I think if you're supporting this, we want to get a resolution to this particular issue, Robin.
I do think, Chair, I agree with Sean, such is the seriousness of the matter. And I do think you're right in terms of where the press are in the Assembly and so on. But I do think in terms of the schools and their meetings and the individual teachers, and I think that message has to be sent out basically today to say that we are sufficiently concerned, and if necessary we are going to meet over the summer period now, whether that's in the form of a press release or but I think it is of such a serious nature that I think we have to say it, Chair.
Okay.
Issue a press release.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, just a couple of other items in relation to matters rising. Syntner's Big Bang event. I attended it. It was a very well attended and a good event. I was glad to be there. The school of my constituency has won again for the third year in succession, as we said. In tabled items, we have the contact details of the school involved in the Syntner's Big Bang event, and propose that we write offering our congratulations, and also propose that we'd ask Syntner's to include recognition of these schools during the committee's Syntner's STEM event on the 1st of October. Pages 18 to 20, you'll find the clerk's cover note, which is as a result of that, so I'll give you some more information. The CBI report, you'll recall that I met the CBI to discuss the report entitled For Steps. We're producing a Northern Ireland version of the report, and we agreed at last week's meeting that the clerk would draft a high-level submission. This is included at page 21, and if members are content, we'll forward to the CBI. Agreed?
Yeah, agreed. Yeah.
Okay. The NICE submission, and this is an issue, just want to tidy this up, members, because it was an oversight. Pages 89 and 91, there's a submission from NICE, or the Northern Ireland Council for Commissioner for Young People, and it was in relation to our inquiry into the Education and Training Inspectorate, and owing to an administrative error, the submission was not included in the inquiry papers. So I'd suggest that we include the submission in the e-version of the report and ask the clerk to write to the organisation accordingly. Right? Okay. The committee may also wish to note that following this, the clerk has revised submission arrangements for all future inquiries, so there are some changes that have been made in relation to that. Correspondence page, and we'll deal with this now so that then we can proceed with the other business as quickly as we can. Correspondence page 162 to 229. We have 8 items provided under correspondence. One I want to raise, and that's in relation to classroom assistants. And the response is useful, but it would be, I think, useful to know how many of the staff who have been written to have chosen not to apply for job evaluation, and how many are still in conflict with their career histories.
Okay, I think the final paragraph, it talks about 89%, the sort of numbers they were talking about, but I will write the department in those terms, write to DE.
And also, what's the cost of keeping the teams in each of the boards dealing with this? Because there's a cost associated. And I think what we'll probably find is there's a disparity between the boards in the way that they've handled this. Some have completed and some have still significant numbers that are still being addressed. The other one is efficient discharge. It might be useful for us to find out how many efficient discharge cases have been received since the 13th of May.
Chair, on the stress-related comment that been put in, and D clarifies that although around 30% of teacher absence is stress-related, only 4% is described.
Related. So that's what they're saying. Sorry, Chair, to provide the committee with the background. It was a briefing that we had on the Audit Office report on teacher absence. Officials said 3 or 4% of teacher absence was owing to stress, but that's job-related stress. About 30%, 25% is related to stress generally. So that was an interesting distinction.
Okay. Okay, so if members, if you're content, I'd suggest that unless you have any other specific issues, we would dispose of the correspondence as a covering sheet at page 160 and 61.
Okay.
Okay, also in tabled items, there are 4 items of correspondence. C2K has provided an update on ICT transformation in schools, and this is set to conclude this summer, and we note that correspondence. RTU Pupil Health and Wellbeing Pilot. The Department has responded to the Committee's request for further information on the RTU pilot programme on pilot health and wellbeing, and the Department advises that it may support a future pilot. So we'll see. You will recall that we're to receive a briefing from RTU on this subject in September, so if we're content to note the correspondence in the meantime and just make sure that we have it whenever we meet them later on in the year. Capital Programme monthly update is also tabled for us. We have the June update on the DE Capital Programme. Might be useful in terms of the Capital Programme to find out. It makes reference to the economic appraisals that were undertaken for Eden, Derry and Glenwood. I wonder what happened to the previous appraisals. They would have previous appraisals, economic appraisals done.
Were they on a previous list, got dropped off it, and they're back on again? So it was Eden, Derry and
Glenwood. And how many other schools are in the same position?
okay, are being reappraised.
And maybe we should clarify when did the Department announce new capital provisions for Shankill schools?
All of those that are on that list would have been in recent, so it would either been January 2012 or June 2013, but I'll add that to the
Capital investment members, tabled this morning we have a letter from the Minister in tabled items. And an embargoed statement to the Assembly read the capital investment relating Newton Breeder and Norton Breeder. So are we content to note this? Okay. Okay, members, those are all the items of correspondence. Forward work programme is, we've already agreed to arrange a briefing in the area plans in September, so are members content with the forward work programme?
Yep.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks for your help in getting through that business. We'll now go to the Department's briefing on the GTC NISL1, and the Department has 2 proposed statutory rules relating to the General Teaching Council for Northern Ireland, and I welcome to the committee this morning Christina Graham, Director of Collaborative Education and Practice, Mary Muskelly, Head of Teacher Education, and Sam Dempster, Teacher Education Team. You're very welcome. Thank you. Apologies for slight delay in getting to the committee. Christina will ask you to speak to these 2 SL1s and then if members have questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to brief the committee on this issue relating to the regulation of the teaching profession. And I'm accompanied this morning by Miriam Muskelly on my left and Sam Dempster from the Department's Teacher Education Team. And if you're content, Chair, I will keep my remarks brief because I appreciate that the members of the committee will have questions on this particular matter. The committee will know from the Department's letter of the 26th of June that an issue around the regulation of the teaching profession has arisen, and it has arisen as a result of the repeal of the Department's powers in Article 70 of the Education and Libraries Order of 1986. Those particular powers enabled the Department to make regulations relating to the consideration and also the potential removal of a person's eligibility to teach on the grounds of misconduct. As a consequence of the repeal, which was in 2009, the regulations no longer had, from then on, or indeed have, any legal effect. And just to explain that, it was always the Department's intention to repeal Article 70, but that would have been done once the General Teaching Council had assumed responsibility for the regulation of the teaching profession. However, when that repeal happened in 2009, the consequences of making the repeal were not adequately assessed in the Department, and therefore, regrettably, those were not communicated to ministers nor to this committee. Consequently, also, officials continued to rely on the regulations made under the 1986 order when considering individual cases of teacher eligibility. So while not for one moment underestimating the gravity of this particular matter, I do want to outline the context for you in which these powers, albeit erroneously, were exercised from 2009. In all of the cases that were considered, the misconduct issue had already been fully investigated by employers, and the individual teachers concerned had been dismissed from their positions. In almost all of the cases that were considered, the teachers had already been barred from working with children under the Safeguarding Vulnerable Groups Order of 2007 and would no longer have been able to work in a range of settings which would have included schools. That does leave us with a very small number of cases which were less clear-cut, and in those instances eligibility was removed for an initial period, and also that period has since expired in relation to those individual cases. Therefore, the teachers concerned were no longer in schools before the Department took the action it did, and that's really to offer you the assurance that those teachers were not actually working in schools. What the Department's intention in doing what it did with regard to the regulation was to provide an additional safeguard for schools, and the decisions that were taken were only taken after careful consideration. Nevertheless, the Department does not have the legal power to provide that additional safeguard. And taking that into consideration, Chair, I would like to outline briefly the action the Department proposes now to take to address this particular situation. And again, turning to the Education Order then of 1998, so the original powers were in the Education Order of 1986, but if we move then to the Education Order of 1998, this order provided the Department with a limited power to make regulations that would then put in place procedures by which the General Teaching Council could consider cases of misconduct and remove individuals from the register of teachers. So again, in terms of the chronology of the General Teaching Council, then just to say that the General Teaching Council's constitution was then created in 2002 and its registration functions began in 2004. If I then move forward to 2006, when proposals for regulations were in development, the Department was advised that they would not enable the Council to exercise the full range of powers that had been intended. In particular, the legislation would not enable GTC to take action short of removing a teacher from the register. For example, to issue a reprimand or to require an individual to undertake further training. And in essence, what the Department was seeking to do was to try to mirror the powers that would be in all of the other jurisdictions for GTCs in Scotland, Wales and at that time in England, and the advice was that those powers would not allow the Department to do it. So the legal advice that the Department took at that time in 2006 was to seek the wider powers for the General Teaching Council in primary legislation. It was then intended that those powers would be included in the Education Bill in 2008, which, as the committee knows, did not progress. Subsequent to all of that, the decision to extend the scope of the Council's proposed powers to include FE lecturers meant that in 2011 a separate bill became the proposed way forward, and that continues, as you know, to be the overall aim of the department. However, as an interim measure, what we propose to do is to revert to using the limited power in the 1998 order to rectify the current gap in the regulation of the teaching profession, and, as I say, an interim measure until we get to the point of the actual GTC bill. We are confident that we could have in place, before the beginning of the new school term, regulations that will put in place those procedures for the General Teaching Council to investigate and also to adjudicate on cases of teacher professional misconduct. Those powers would enable the Council to remove teachers from the register, usually for a time-bound period following an investigation. But it would be to remove teachers from the register. As I said, they would not have the powers as yet to take action short of removal. As previously, the procedures will allow teachers also to make representations in their defence and for any decision taken to be reviewed. It is then envisaged that those procedures would remain in place until the issue can be addressed more comprehensively in the proposed General Teaching Council bill. So, to sum up, Chair, the Department is acting to address an issue which arose as a result of not assessing the implications comprehensively, nor communicating the impact of changes to legislation a number of years ago, which regrettably did not come to light until recently. Thank you, Chair. We're very willing to take any questions or queries.
Festina, I made a comment, and I'm not going to ask you to comment on this, but I made the comment earlier, so that you maybe have heard it outside. I'm extremely disappointed. The Permanent Secretary is spending his time in other functions today, when here we have, in his own department, an issue that has been running on since 2009 and has only come to light, and we have flowery language that tries to basically cover up another crisis. A crisis in the sense of this is a very important issue. This is not some just minor issue in terms of how we govern our educational system.
Yep.
Papers that you supplied seem to indicate that in the period following the repeal of the Article 70, action may have been taken against a limited number of teachers
Yes, that's correct.
without the necessary legal firing.
Yes.
How many?
Chair, in relation to where we removed eligibility, there were 10 cases.
Okay. And if the department did take action without the necessary legal virus, what repercussions will this have for the department and for the teachers involved?
In almost all of those cases, the individuals had been barred under other legislation, so our action had no additional practical effect. In a very small number of cases, we've removed eligibility, and there is a potential, I suppose, for judicial review of those decisions.
And how many of those out of the 10?
It's fewer than 5.
The papers also seem to indicate that the proposed regulations may have had unqualifiable financial implications. What is that in terms of
That would largely depend on action individuals may take against the department. It could
Right.
be for loss of earnings, something like that.
Right. And to date, has there been anything like that?
No, we have yet to notify the individuals, but we will do that. It's in hand at the moment.
Okay, so we have a number of people who haven't been notified that this is the case.
Yes.
Is that the 5 or the 10?
It'll be the fewer than 5.
Yeah. I have to say, Festina, my personal view is I will be reluctant to move on an SL1 until we see the bill. I think that if the department has overseen a situation or mismanaged the situation since 2009 and we're now in 2014, waiting another few weeks in terms of the bill coming to this committee, and then we see exactly what is being proposed, won't probably make a lot of difference. Because I've been caught, and this committee has been caught before, where we have approved an SLR and then the Minister has used it against us whenever a problem has arisen, and he has said in the House, well, the Education Committee did approve this. So this is a risk the department is taking. This is not a risk this committee is taking. We're disappointed that we weren't informed of the way it seems as though the Minister wasn't informed, to be fair to the Minister, for whatever reason, that this was the case, and this has only come to light. Joanne?
Thank you, Chair. Apologise for missing the start of your briefing. Some questions may have been covered, and I know the Chair touched on this. Again, the letter to the committee, we were told the gap in provision where teachers can't have eligibility to teach removed or restricted due to misconduct, and I think, if I'm right, the current powers, that's 10 that you've just alluded to, isn't that correct? How often have these powers been used? And we are told currently the department cannot obtain or share information with employers relating to individual cases. Can you maybe explain that for us, if you haven't already in your introduction?
Well, as we've already said, since 2009 we used the powers to remove eligibility in those 10 cases. In the vast majority of those cases, we were actually notified by the other statutory authorities that the action had already been taken. In 2 cases we've been notified by the individual's employer.
Okay, I do share the Chair's concerns on it. You also say that the department have consulted with the Teachers' Council. Was this a wide enough consultation? Were there any other bodies that you could have consulted with?
The General Teaching Council have responsibility for the wider regulation of the teaching profession. I'd say in the 1998 order, it was always originally intended that they would have the full range of powers to remove eligibility and also to take action short of that. So we, as the department, believe that they are the best placed body to take forward action in respect of the teaching profession.
So you are confident you've consulted widely enough?
Our initial meeting with the General Teaching Council's registrar was very positive.
Okay, and again, I'm concerned that you're proposing to lay this rule during recess, and the Chair has touched on this also. Can you let us know why it wasn't brought to the committee earlier today?
When the issue first came to light, we had to make a number of assessments regarding other issues in the regulations around qualifications and health issues related to teachers. We had to seek legal advice. All those led to, those all had to be assessed. We had to look to see if there were other powers available to the department to take other action, and all those things had to be assessed and addressed before we could bring forward proposals.
This is our last committee meeting, and for me it's my very last committee meeting, so we'll watch with interest, but it's just concerning that it's brought just in the last committee meeting before recess.
Appreciate that, and I appreciate it's unusual to lay statutory rules during recess, but we were keen to get these in before the new school term.
It's concerning. Thanks, Chair.
When actually, Sam, did it come to light?
It first came to light in February this year when we were making preparations for the bill. We were looking at the sorts of repeals that we might make in that bill.
Any other members? Any other questions? Faustina, there was 2 rules, 2 SL1s. You want to speak to the other one as well?
Sorry, Chair, if I could just address that second issue as well, very, very briefly. What we propose to do in the other statutory rule is to extend the term of office of the current membership of the General Teaching Council by 1 year to facilitate the passage of the bill. This will provide for a smooth transition from the old council to the new council. That's essentially what it's doing.
Okay, no other questions, members? Sam, Faustina, Marianne, thank you. You didn't have long in front of us on this issue. It is an issue that I think, given the fact that this came to us today, and we are, just to clarify, this may not be the last committee meeting. We may meet over the summer because of the issues in relation to the teacher redundancies, so we're keeping that under review depending on what information we get back from the department. But in terms of this SL1, or the 2 SL1s, we have been up for the second one in terms of allowing the continuation of the existing GTC to continue. I'm more reluctant in terms of the first because of the way in which this has been brought to light and the fact that we are having a bill, and it may be that we will wait till we see the bill before we make any judgment. But the department still has power of its own to lay the SL1. That's not the power that this committee has. That is an issue. It's caveated by the concerns that we have raised at the committee today. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Peter, do you, just maybe to sum up in relation to that, members, I think something else that might be useful to inform our consideration of this might be useful if we wrote to GTC and asked them for their comment in relation to this.
Absolutely.
Members, this is another.
Even if they'd have to come to give us a briefing.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. And then, because I am reluctant to for the committee to endorse something, and then basically at some later stage it'll be said, oh John, you agreed to this. So I'm being ultra cautious now. Once bitten, twice shy, I think is a good policy to have now with the department. Okay, Peter.
Sorry, Chair, just to be clear, on terms
Keep
of
us right.
the SL1 about the Constitution and extending the membership of the General Teaching Council, members are content for that to be made, I think I'm hearing. But in terms of the other SL1, members haven't made up their mind and are seeking further information from General Teaching Council in September. Or maybe this year.
Okay, thank you. Moving on then to the department's briefing in relation to Together Building United Community, or TBUC, is it? I hate that phrase. I think it's better using the full title, Together Building a United Community. Shared educational campuses, and the clerk's cover note is at page 104 and 107 in the papers, and you'll find the departmental briefing paper setting out the Together Building United Community Education Campus application procedure, selection protocol, and the relevant extracts from OFM, DFM documentation, and also the relevant Department of Education correspondence. As you will be aware, yesterday, later on yesterday afternoon, the Minister announced 3 shared education campuses will proceed to the planning stage. So we're glad to have with us to the committee today. Dermot McCain, you're welcome back, good to see you. And Roy Stevenson, you're very welcome. So Dermot, if you want to maybe give us an overview in relation to this, and then if members have questions, then we'll take it from there. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Well, good morning. Thank you for the invitation to come to the committee today to provide an update on the Shared Education Campuses programme. By way of introduction, it may be helpful to members if I quickly step through the background to the Shared Education Campuses programme. As members will recall, it was in May 2013 the First and Deputy First Ministers launched the Together Building a United Community strategy. This strategy represents a key building block in the implementation of the programme for Government 2011 to 2015 and reflects the Executive's commitment to improving community relations and building a united shared society. The strategy contained a range of proposals, including a commitment to commence work on 10 shared education campuses within the next 5 years. These campuses are to be pathfinder projects leading in the future to a wider programme of shared education capital projects. The proposal for shared education campuses fell to the Department of Education to take forward. In developing a programme for shared education campuses, the Minister was clear that it should complement the work already underway on shared education, build on existing sharing between schools and be consistent with the area planning work being taken forward by the Department. From the outset, it was important to be clear as to what is meant by schools sharing. The definition adopted was the same as that provided to the Ministerial Advisory Group on shared education, i.e. shared education involving 2 or more schools or other educational institutions from different sectors working in collaboration with the aim of delivering education benefits to learners. Chair, as I've already stated, the Department already had a range of programmes and initiatives aimed at supporting and promoting shared education, and you will be hearing more about those this morning from Festina Graham and her team immediately after this session. Therefore, the Shared Campuses programme was targeted at providing support for infrastructure projects aimed at improving or facilitating sharing initiatives within schools. The programme is specifically aimed at providing schools with the opportunity to build on existing sharing arrangements with other schools and to access funding to help improve or provide shared facilities. However, the underpinning priority for the Department has been that the sharing must deliver educational benefits to the children and young people involved. Chair, the Minister launched the programme in January 2014 with a deadline of 31st of March for receipt of expressions of interest. He wants schools and practitioners on the ground to consider and bring forward new and creative proposals which would benefit from the availability of shared facilities. To help potential applicants, the Department drew up a protocol and application process listing essential criteria and desirable criteria against which a proposal would be assessed. The committee has been provided a copy of the protocol together with a list of those who submitted expressions of interest. The Department asked that managing authorities for the schools involved provide endorsement of the proposals before submitting it. The reason for asking the managing authority to do so was because it was agreed at the Area Planning Steering Group meeting in December 2013 that this endorsement was necessary, as any investment at or on behalf of schools through the programme had the potential to create ongoing liabilities as well as recurrent resource implications for those schools, and therefore the managing authority should be aware of these applications and be prepared to support those going forward. Also, proposals needed to be consistent with the managing authority's strategic area plans for schools under their control. Given that this was the first call for such a programme, it was not clear at the time of the application what the response rate might be. However, we have been encouraged by the level of interest in the programme, which has generated 16 applications were submitted at the deadline. The Department, under the direction of the Minister, assessed the proposals against the criteria set out at the application stage. Recommendations were made to the Minister on the projects which were deemed to have met the criteria and which could be advanced to the next stage. That is working up a detailed business case for the proposal. Chair, I would like to take the opportunity just to reiterate a point made in the guidance to applicants, that it will only be after approval of the detailed business case and subject to availability of funding at the time will projects be permitted to move to the award of contract. At this time, and based on the experience of delivering other capital projects, we do not anticipate that work will begin on construction on campuses much before 2016. Chair, the committee will be aware that yesterday the Minister did announce the first 3 shared education campuses proposals which will now proceed to the next stage, that is the development of a full business case. The 3 projects being a shared STEM and sixth form facility at St Mary's High School, Limavady and Limavady High School, a shared educational campus for Moy Primary School and St John's Primary School in Moy, and a shared education campus for Ballycastle High School and Cross and Passion College. The Minister has stated that the 3 projects selected will build on well-established sharing arrangements between the schools involved and will help embed and enhance those sharing arrangements. At the same time as announcing the 3 successful projects, the Minister announced that a second call for proposals would be open in the autumn of this year. Unsuccessful proposals submitted to the first call have been returned to the applicants together with feedback on their application. Chair, there is a merit in a number of those proposals that were submitted in the first round, and it is hoped that given further work the proposals may consider resubmitting them to the next call in the autumn. Chair, it was always the view of the Department that there would be a series of calls for projects under this programme, as it was highly unlikely that there would be in a position to announce 10 projects immediately. The fact that we have a second call in the autumn will allow schools who may not have been ready to submit a proposal by the close of the first call, as well as those who were unsuccessful this time, to work up their proposals in more detail. Chair, the Minister remains committed to delivering the target of 10 shared education campuses, and I will conclude my remarks at that and happy to take questions and answer any queries the committee may have.
Thank you, Dermot. Obviously, for those 3 schools, those 3 consortiums that were approved or at least given permission to move to the next stage, that was good news for them, and obviously one of them my own constituency. 2 schools which work exceptionally well together, and they're to be commended, as are the others, in the work that they've done to get at least to this stage. In terms of how the others were not successful, if you take one, I'll just use as an example because I would know some of the detail around how it's been played out locally, Coleraine Educational Village. There's obviously area plans which are currently being worked up and development proposals which will be published shortly in relation to changes in that area. What consideration did the Department give to that proposal in the light of pending development proposals which would either enhance or expand the educational provision that is being proposed in that area?
Well, Chair, maybe it's not appropriate to go into the detail of individual applications in this forum.
But that generic point in terms of
in relation to
aligning area plans and proposals which came as a result of this.
Well, it was made clear as part of the protocol that was issued to applicants that proposals coming forward had to be consistent with the area planning work that was being undertaken by the planning authorities, and that therefore, as part of the assessment, we did look at the schools involved, we did look at the area planning, if there were any area planning issues associated with those schools involved, as part of assessing the suitability of those projects to proceed at this time.
And would that have included, and we'll make no reference to individual schools, but say, for example, if there was a proposal to have a sixth form, what implication or what consideration was given to the impact that that would have on another sixth form in the immediate area? Because obviously, if you take the protocol and the procedure the department would take in relation to the development proposal, one of the issues that it would give consideration to is the impact that the development proposal would have on other schools. In light of these applications, was that considered? So if there was a proposal for a sixth form, was the impact of that proposal, if it was to proceed, thought out as to how it would impinge on other schools in the immediate area?
Chair, I don't think that specific example arose in any of the applications, but it would have been the case that if it involved a new sixth form that did not already exist, that creation of a new sixth form in the school would require the publication of a development proposal. Therefore, it would not be appropriate to support a proposal that hadn't an approved sixth form provision within it.
Yes, right, okay. So the criteria would still have to be it had a sixth form provision.
Yes, if it involved sharing arrangements involving their existing sixth form,
yes,
that would be a different issue than creating a new sixth form. The creation of a new sixth form does, at a school that does not have one, would require the publication of a development proposal. Therefore, you couldn't support a shared campus proposal involving a sixth form that hadn't been properly endorsed.
And then finally, before we go to members, obviously the delay in the approval of economic appraisals can become very problematic, because if there's a delay in the process, by the time you get to the next phase, the economic appraisal could be out of date. Given that the timescale in relation to when some of these would commence at the earliest is 2016, probably 17, is there a risk that further delay would come about as a result of bureaucratic roundabout or merry-go-round that we have in terms of actually moving proposals forward to be, as we call them, shovel-ready?
Well, Chair, in relation to that, perhaps the work that Philip and I have been doing on the capital projects over the last number of years, we've learned a number of lessons in relation to how can we advance some of these economic appraisals more quickly and get them worked up more quickly. And as part of the lessons learned, what we will be aiming to do with these projects is put support in place for those 3 projects that have been successful. So we will be aiming to give them support now to quickly move to develop a business case. We have set a very challenging timescale of coming forward with a business case by the end of the calendar year, and therefore with a more structured support available to the proposers, we are hoping that we can iron out any difficulties with the economic appraisals at an early stage. And hence the quality of the proposals, the business cases coming forward, will mean that we can progress them through the system much quicker.
I know I'm asking now in the specific, so if you can't answer this, then I'll understand. Does the Limavady proposal include the bridge between the 2 schools?
To be quite honest, no, Chair. That was subject to a separate application, to a separate programme.
So there's only the sixth form provision
and the STEM Centre.
The STEM Centre.
Yes.
Joanne?
Thanks, Chair. Thank you for your briefing. Dermot, you say that there were 16 expressions of interest received by the end of May. And,
end of March.
End of March. And you have a target for 10, and I just took a few notes. No construction before 2016. So can you maybe explain for us how the department go about grading each in terms of their educational benefits to the students?
Well, Chair, we did set out in the application the range of essential criteria that we expected the applications to meet, and one of those was to be able to demonstrate the educational benefits that they would intend to achieve through the creation of the shared facilities. So at this stage, it was based on the evidence that was provided in the applications as to the existing sharing arrangements and the educational benefits that they had already been able to demonstrate through existing sharing arrangements, as well as their plans for improving and enhancing those through the availability of new shared facilities. As had been clear at the time of the application, the target was to build on existing sharing within schools rather than new sharing arrangements that had not already taken place within schools. So primarily the applications came from those schools that had already a number of sharing programmes and sharing arrangements in place.
I'm thinking specifically, maybe you can't disclose specifically, how do you grade them in terms internally of the educational benefit to students? And I would also be interested to find out what work was undertaken with schools to enable them to put forward proposals, and was there a concerted effort made to ensure that campuses, for example, were geographically spread across Northern Ireland? Can you enlighten us a bit more on that?
We did not do any detailed work with any proposers prior to receipt of the application. Indeed, we wouldn't have been in the position to know who was even considering coming forward with shared education proposals. We were aware of a number, or one or two, but those would have been the only ones that we would have been aware of until we went out for the call for expressions of interest. There was no attempt to ensure that there was a geographical spread. We just wanted to look at the quality of the applications we received with a view to ensuring that we move ahead and support the best projects and projects that align with the policies and aims and objectives of the Department of Education.
I thought that would be part and parcel of it, that it's vital that they're geographically spread across Northern Ireland, and also you've said the schools, it's in the criteria for the educational benefit of the students, and I would like to know how you grade that, how you personally, internally grade that, obviously how you decide which schools are going to benefit based on their information on their educational benefit, because obviously all schools that apply are going to say it's going to be an educational benefit to students.
Well, talking generally, I mean, some of the applications didn't clearly articulate within their applications how they were going to achieve educational benefits. A number of the ones, particularly those that were successful, had really outlined the sharing that they had already undertaken, how that had helped the educational achievement and the access to a range of different courses across the campus arrangements between the schools, be that to making better use of the resources and the facilities they had to deliver a wider curriculum.
So it wasn't a deciding factor then?
It was one of the factors that were down as the essential criteria. It was only one of 6 essential criteria that were set at the time of the application.
And no geographical spread considered, you've just either?
No, I mean, you can't actually. These proposals have to come from the ground up and have to be built on sharing arrangements that are growing organically within communities and regions, and I don't think it's possible to force or determine or put in place a shared arrangement in a geographical area if there isn't already some sort of foundation of sharing already going on within that area.
But you would agree, I'm sure, Dermot, that it is important that essentially where we want to get is a geographical spread across.
We would certainly look to try to get 10 good shared educational campus projects. As to where they are, if there are more, then obviously we would need to look at the merits of supporting those and the availability of funding to deliver them. I'm not sure that the location is the deciding factor. We would obviously want to ensure that we can support all the projects that are worth supporting, no matter where they come forward from.
Well, we're told, moving on, we're told that shared education campuses must comply with, you've outlined, area planning decisions in the locality. Does that mean that some of the expressions of interest could not proceed due to the issues with area planning in their area?
Yeah, without going into the details, there were certainly applications where there were area planning issues, and those will be in the feedback going back to those applicants, where clarity may be required from the planning authorities as to how they propose to address those area planning issues going forward before any decision could be taken.
So they're parked essentially, they're not moving because of area planning. It is restricting. Those projects are essentially parked for the meantime.
Well, the questions have been asked in relation to if they're within the area plans that have come forward, that there's questions around the viability or sustainability of a school, or looking at an area that there's other provision within the area. The question has to be asked before you would invest in a campus: what is the long-term solution for the schools in that area that would give the Minister and the Department confidence that they're investing in a shared campus that would be there in the longer term?
And again, finally, Chair, no construction before 2016. You spoke of the second call in the autumn to enable other schools to apply.
Yeah,
So,
I mean,
so
just
if the
based.
first tranche is of those 10, no construction before 2016, when do you envisage then?
Well, obviously it will depend on how long we give for the application process, the quality and the number that we get back, and how advanced those proposals are. But based on my own experience and experience within the department of taking projects through the economic appraisal process, getting full business cases approved, and then moving through the procurement processes that the public sector must comply with to delivering it on the ground, you would be looking at about 18 months for that process. So therefore, from start to finish, to get for a small scheme, you're probably talking about 18 months.
For the second call to proceed to the next level then?
Well, at this stage, we haven't set a deadline. We will consider that over the summer months, as to the Minister intends to, as I said in the press release, open the call in September. We will go out with, based on our experience this time round, whether we need to refine the protocol and the guidance that's been provided, and set a deadline for when we want the expressions of interest back in, and hopefully.
So essentially, it could be 2018.
It could be 2017 or 2018.
Thanks, Chair.
Danny?
Thank you. Thanks, Chair. And really following up, and thank you. I was disappointed yesterday to hear from one of the schools that they heard it on the news before they had any communication. And I got the impression from what I've been told is that a lot of the schools didn't realise, having put in for it, that they weren't getting it until it came from Maggie Taggart.
Sorry?
I had a complaint from one school saying they didn't know that they weren't one of the three.
Right.
Until they heard on the news the announcement. Would you review what you're doing so that they get told before it goes out to the papers?
Absolutely. I mean, we certainly made every effort yesterday we had the letters emailed to every individual school in advance of the press release going public. So the information had been sent to the Chair of the Board of Governors, as well as to the managing authorities of the schools involved, in advance of the press release being released. So it is unfortunate that.
I think it may have been an email to the C2K, where it is being worked on.
Right. Okay. So we definitely had it in the system. We had emailed everybody out. We have it. Given the timescales involved, we didn't have time to phone every individual school, which we probably would have tried to have done if we had had more time to do that.
Joanne's partly touched on it. Is there anyone actually pushing the schools to do it, actually putting incentives in front of the schools to say, look, you should be looking for ways to share education, rather than just waiting for them to come to you? Is there any system for encouraging people to go down that route?
Well, certainly you will be hearing from Festina after this session on a range of initiatives within the department on sharing and encouraging and facilitating sharing arrangements across schools. And certainly, as part of the feedback that we have provided to the unsuccessful applicants, we have offered that we will meet with the planning authorities and the applicants to talk them through their applications with a view to identifying areas where they perhaps need to provide more evidence or where there are questions that need to be answered, with a view to try to encouraging them to come forward with more robust proposals. And as part of the second call, we will certainly be making the offer to go out and talk to applicants. I certainly did talk to at least 2 proposers of projects before they submitted their applications. They invited the department to come and meet them to talk through the proposals before they submitted them, and we'd be happy to do so again in the second call.
Okay, and one last thing. I mean, the funding that we hear about coming from Westminster, with 100 million, is that tying us? Are we waiting to see if that's the 100 million coming in and what the timescales are? Is that driving this, or are we going ahead anyway with funding from it?
These projects at this stage are not part of the RRI arrangement as part of the 100 million. At this stage, the Minister is committed to moving ahead and developing the business case for these 3 proposals. Obviously, we will wish to have further discussions with OFM, DFM, part of the budget setting process for 15-16 onwards, to determine how these projects, these capital projects, will be funded.
Okay. Thank you.
John?
Thanks, Chair, and Dermot, and no, you're very welcome. Can I go back a wee bit, Dermot, to tell me a wee bit about the rationale for the revision of the Capital Works protocol? How it has changed?
The Capital Works protocol,
Yeah.
as opposed to the protocol for the shared campuses.
Well, it's an integral part of that. You know, I want to follow on there to see how the protocol for the shared campus is aligned with the Capital Works project. But first of all, there was a revision of the Capital Works protocol.
Perhaps that would be a question that Philip might be better to answer as part of any session you might have on the Capital Works. I was not involved in the revision to the latest iteration of the protocol, but obviously the department has to look at a range of issues, including experiences from previous calls as we move forward with the process, but also looking at how we're trying to ensure that we get the most effective use of the available funds and target it at the areas that will deliver the most beneficial outcome.
And does the shared campus protocol align with the major Capital Works protocol? With things like, for example, does it favour schools that have higher levels of special education needs or higher levels of free school meals?
At this stage, no, it doesn't. The shared campus is probably at a much more higher level than that, in relation to that we were seeking to bring forward expressions of interest at this stage on a sharing basis, something that hadn't been done before. So we were setting broad brush criteria as to the types of projects that we'd be looking to support. We certainly wouldn't have had a sophisticated system in relation to targeting free school meals or special education needs, as would be the case within the infrastructure, the capital programme. But certainly in regards to alignment, there was coordination between the 2 divisions within the department to ensure there was consistency across the 2 programmes in relation to if there were proposals that may have overlapped, how those may be factored in. And you'll be aware that the Minister did say, as part of his, statement on the capital, that the Ballycastle proposal would be processed through this, the shared campuses programme, and the outcome of that would be awaited before it would be considered as part of the capital programme, simply because it was one that appeared in both
lists. Would proposals that supported rationalisation into a single campus be favoured?
I wouldn't say favoured, but certainly if there were proposals that were coming forward for rationalisation into a single campus, that would be taken into consideration. But it was not put down as an essential criteria. But obviously the degree of sharing and how that sharing was to be delivered is a matter for those projects coming forward, and as can be seen from the 3 successful projects. It involves provision of shared space at each campus, but it doesn't involve a single campus, although having said that, the Moy proposal is on a single site. The Ballycastle proposal, the 2 schools are located across the road from each other, as is the case in Lima Valley, so they are quite close together, which means it's quite favourable, it's quite beneficial in the delivering of shared facilities between the 2 schools.
Also, in terms of the Department's Sustainable Schools policy, has it really been used as the main criteria for the decisions when submissions were being dealt with?
It was certainly a factor that had to be factored in. One of the criteria is the context of area planning, and that it should be consistent with what was proposed in the area plans that were being provided by or developed by the planning authorities. Right.
Is there any significant weighting been given to enhancing good relations?
We scored the projects, or we tried to look at the projects against each of the essential criteria, but we could only go on the basis of the information that was provided in the application. And societal benefits were one of the essential criteria, and we certainly looked at the evidence that was coming forward as to how they believed that the proposals would help enhance community relations within those proposals.
So there is a significant weight to improving good relations?
We didn't have a specific weighting against it. We had a scoring matrix that we tried to score it against.
That seems strange, particularly when it's TPIP funding, isn't it? If it's not really high on the agenda.
Well, one of the essential criteria is that there has to be sharing between at least 2 schools involved, that there has to be educational benefits, and flowing from that would be the societal benefits to be accrued through the sharing by pupils and teachers from at least 2 schools from differing sectors. So you can look at the community benefits associated. So
it's really implied rather than spelled out?
Well, I mean, there were we would also look at, as it said within it, facilities that would be available for cross-community purpose after school hours. I mean, as is the case with any schools, we wish to encourage and facilitate the use of those facilities by the community, not only by the school children during the school day, but after school hours by the local community. And if these facilities can enhance the use of the facilities on a cross-community basis, that would be certainly something that we would favour.
Thanks, Chair.
Stephen? Thank you. Just a quick question. Again, sorry, but it's in relation to 2016. So it is, of the 3 projects that are go to the next stage, one of them, namely the Moy, is going to require a new site. Has this been identified or whatever, and does that not make the 2016 date wildly ambitious if it has?
Stephen, from memory, I would need to go back and check, but from memory I do believe the site has been identified, and that therefore that should be able to be progressed reasonably quickly. I think that from memory, from talking to the board at the time, I think they had already identified a potential site and that it would be available.
That's fine. That's all I know, Chair. Thank you.
Maeve?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you. Just, I suppose, going back to the essential criteria, the 6 that you referred to,
yes,
were they all weighted equally?
No, we put increased emphasis on the educational benefits, being the primary one, where we put enhanced weighting against the educational benefits that the applicants would be able to demonstrate from memory. I think that was the one that had the highest weighting. Some of them were a case of a yes/no marking, and therefore, if they did achieve that, it was a yes, and they achieved the maximum score. And if they didn't, then they didn't meet the essential criteria.
I think, Chair, it might be
The other
useful. Sorry, it might be useful to have that information shared with the committee, because just looking at the 6 criteria, you know, you're looking at things like, as Sean has said, evidence of community support, and then endorsement from respective managing authorities,
Yes.
which you would tend to think would be in place if a project is going forward anyway, and may not need to have the same weighting or criteria as societal benefits or educational benefits.
Maeve, I think, sort of, based on our experience of having done this the first time, when we look at this the second time, we may take on board some of those specific points. And it's something that, in working through this from a blank piece of paper up into, this was our initial attempt at trying to identify projects, we may look at some of those lessons. And I would agree with you in relation to the endorsement of the managing authority should be a gateway. It should be a yes/no. And if you have it, you're through to the marking process, as opposed to if you don't have it, then you don't get through to the marking process. So we will pick up some of those issues and probably refine the essential criteria and the protocol for the second call.
Okay, well that's useful to know, and I mean it's just stressing the point as well. If we have, as Sean has rightly pointed out, a revised formula in terms of capital works, which is taken into consideration level 5 SEN and free school meals, that it would be important that there would be a demonstration of need in this criteria as well, given that we have one programme of capital work that is very clearly targeting specific sections or sectors, that it would be important to reflect that across this piece as well.
Well, I think we will certainly take on board those comments, and we will look at that and see how we need to align the shared campuses protocol with the capital protocol. I would sort of, the only point I would make is that the infrastructure, the capital programme is aimed at individual schools, and therefore it is much easier to identify within an individual school the level of free school meals and special education needs that would be using the new facility, whereas this is a shared facility across 2 schools for a range of issues, and it may be a bit more problematic to come up with a mechanism where you would have to look at it on the basis of across the schools, the free school meals and the special education needs, and how these facilities would contribute towards that.
But I think, Chair, just coming back to that, I mean, again, it would be easier to demonstrate outcomes if you're tackling some of those issues as well, as opposed to endorsement from respective managing authorities being an essential criteria. I mean, surely to be able to demonstrate, regardless of if you have to go across 2 schools, but to be able to demonstrate, you know, practical outcomes in terms of tackling disadvantage would be a stronger outcome than the managing authority signing off on it, I would think.
No, I take on board that point, and as I say, we will look at that and reflect on those points as we look at the second call for proposal in the autumn.
Okay, thank you for that. Thank you, Chair.
Maybe I'm too simplistic here. Would it not be simple if you've only 2 schools, looking at the total number of free school meals in School A, total number of free school meals in School B, add the 2 together, gives you a total, and you do the same in relation to the total number of pupils who are special needs register? Or would that be a too simple a way of looking at it? Because there's no other schools, you're only talking about 2 schools here.
Chair, if you're only talking about 2 schools, some of the proposals involved 11 schools.
Oh yes, I appreciate what they're
the other issue is when you're looking at a proposal even across 2 schools, but the proposal is only in, say, for a STEM 6th form centre, which therefore it's not been used by all the pupils at the schools, so therefore you need to then be able to break it down more specifically in relation to the 6th form. Yeah. So I'm not saying we'd rule it out, but I think we'd need to look at the pros and cons and the issues around that.
Yeah. And on the issue of managing authorities, of those that have been approved to proceed to the next stage, do we have the endorsement of the managing authorities in relation to these 3 projects?
Absolutely, they would not have been successful had they not had the endorsement of the managing authorities. In fact, if they hadn't had the endorsement of the managing authority, they wouldn't even have got through to a marking stage.
Robin?
Thank you, Chair, and thank the members for coming today. My questions, Chair, were much in line with what the Deputy Chair was asking, but can I make just one? It's based on comments that Mrs Dobson was making, and she seemed to be encouraging you to look at a geographical spread. I would hope that's not the case of looking at a geographical spread, but the title, Together Building a United Community, that we will be seeing a grassroots, coming from the grassroots, and we'd be encouraging that ethos rather than some sort of geographical spread and insisting on that sort of criteria. Am I right in that?
Robin, well, as I said to Joanne, I think, yes, we would be looking at supporting projects on their merit, no matter where they are located. And in supporting the projects, I would agree that this has to be built from the grassroots up, so the proposals have to come forward from the applicants where they believe that they have the confidence and the desire to move ahead with those. It's certainly not a case that we would be in a position to impose sharing arrangements to schools that did not want to participate. So that way, I don't think would be very successful or very effective.
Happy with that, Chair. Thank you.
Chair, just for clarity, I was probing the questions and asking about a geographical spread, as it's my right to do so as a member of the committee.
But I don't think that was being questioned.
No, but Robin is saying that I was pushing other way, that I was endorsing a geographical spread. I was simply asking and probing about a geographical spread.
Okay. To get through, Dermot, tell me, as far as the issue of location is concerned, how much of, and maybe it impinges on this issue of geographical spread to a degree, if you get 2 schools, one at either end of a county, or one, that there's a considerable distance between, but yet that there's a benefit that has been demonstrated in that they have been engaged in sharing. Is there a weighting that's given to the fact, and I'm not trying to imply that this is the case, so I'm trying to paint a possibility, that one of the partners in that provision ends up with a very good, enhanced element of the deal, and the other element ends up with something which is, you could describe as being minimal or minimalist. And when you look, if you were this proverbial man from Mars at occasion that comes and looks at these things, you would say the only reason why that really was ever progress was because School A was a better beneficiary for the totality of their school, as opposed to the collective element which was originally shared education. Because when you build a building, it doesn't say in it, or say on that building, this will only be used for those pupils for whom it was originally identified, shared education. So if there's any other pupils in that school, they'll never have access to that building. The building becomes, or the facility becomes, part of the school structure. Is that something that was taken into consideration, just so that in case nobody's trying to be clever here around how they access additional capital works and really enhances their school, and really to tag on, well, we better go with those boys up the road?
Well, far be it for me to question the motives of the applicants in that regard. I mean, the one thing I would say is that the applications coming forward needed to have the endorsement of the relative managing authorities. Yes. Therefore, they had to be content with any proposed sharing arrangements, that there would be benefits to those participating. In relation to the location as part of the both the application process and the marking system, we did make it clear that we would be looking at the location, potential sharing arrangements, and we did try, as part of our assessment, look at the distance between the relative schools involved, and we certainly would have taken into consideration the practicalities of moving children and young people large distances between schools, and how could that effectively be done and not and deliver effective educational outcomes. And certainly, as regards facilities for one school, we were also clear in looking at the proposals that we wanted the applicants needed to be clear how these new facilities would be used for sharing, and we certainly would have questioned if we thought that there was any attempt to put in facilities for one school that would not be used substantially for the sharing element of the programme.
Okay. Roy, you got a flight. We'll bring you back on your own the next time. Thank you, Roy. Dermot, thank you very much.
Okay.
Again,
Chair.
thanks for all your help.
Right, thank you.
And look forward to working with you over summer.
And can I pass on my congratulations to your daughter on her graduation? I
Yes.
saw the
It's
picture in the paper last night.
It's an awful thing that you use your daughter for publicity. It was a very enjoyable day, so thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Members, we'll move on to just maybe do you want to just tidy up? Yes.
So we're writing to the department seeking clarity on the weighting of the criteria and also for information on the revised criteria. Also perhaps indicating that some members felt that the criteria should be aligned with the capital work criteria, which is around SME, level 5 SEM, and perhaps indicating some members' concerns about the one of the current criteria being about the managing authority's endorsement. But anyway.
Yeah.
Okay, have enough, Sean?
You know, it's just in terms of the rationale of the revision of that capital works, I wonder where does that actually fit in? You know, for example, projects that were announced recently or projects were announced in 2013. Does this new revision then come into the play in terms of economic appraisal and all that type of thing?
I think that's what we need clarity.
Yeah.
I think, Chair, the committee has sought a briefing on this in September on the revised criteria. My understanding would be that no, that once but clarity is required. But I would have thought if a school has had an announcement recently, or in January 2012 or June 2013. It is where it is. It's been advanced in planning, and all it then has to do is get through the hurdles in terms of the economic appraisal, etc., and planning and all those other good things. But my understanding was that the new protocol applied to the announcement we just heard and to any future announcement. But I see the member requires clarity.
Yeah, the reason I need clarity is because some of these economic appraisals seem to go on for decades, you know.
They do.
But that should be an economic appraisal, not like an educational appraisal. So the department's now talking about gateways. So you would have got through the gate in terms of your, say those recent announcements in terms of the level of free school meals and your SEN levels. You've got through that bit. Now it's economic appraisal time. Do the sums add up? So that, I think, is passed. So once you've got through the gate, you've got through the gate. I'll put you back round again, but clarity is required, one would think.
What do we just be so sure?
Many gates.
Just when you go through the gate, there's a maze, and then you have to go out the maze. And
Come back out again.
yes, if you come back out again.
Are we pushing now to get them to encourage shared education rather than just leave it?
Well, I think that's we'll ask that question now when Christina then comes in, because that brings us on to the final one, is the shared integrated education update, and it's the clerk's cover notice at page 237 and 246, and you'll find the department's briefing paper, recent correspondence in relation to FMD-FM shared education signature projects, and a copy of the Minister's statement on shared education and the executive summary on the Ministerial Advisory Group on advancing shared education. So we welcome back Christina and Andrew Bell and Eve Stewart. So Christina, you're welcome back.
Thank you.
Andrew, good to see you again. And Eve, thank you for coming to us. and Eve or Christina, I think you'll take the first part of the briefing, and then we'll proceed.
Okay, thank you very much, Chair. I'll just have some water, if I may, please. Well, we welcome the opportunity to brief the committee on the Department's work to advance shared education in line with the programme for government commitments and the related actions identified within the Together Building a United Community strategy. Shared education has been defined as education which will provide opportunities for children and young people from different community backgrounds to learn together. Additional detail of the definition, which was agreed by the Ministerial Advisory Group, includes also then education which meets the needs of and provides for the education together of learners from all Section 75 categories and socio-economic status. Also that it involves schools and other education providers of differing ownership, sectoral identity and ethos, management type or governance arrangements, and ultimately is a form of education that will deliver educational benefits to learners in the context of efficient and effective use of resources, promotion of equality of opportunity, good relations, equality of identity, respect for diversity and community cohesion. So a lot of detail there in terms of what shared education covers, but at the same time I think it's hugely important that that detail is actually there to ensure that all of the elements of this work are actually encompassed in the definition. Obviously, the Department has been involved in education on a collaborative and shared basis for a number of years through its various policy initiatives, such as community relations. Also, we've had extended skills provision, the entitlement framework, and more latterly, the Department has been involved as managing agent for the 22 International Fund for Ireland shared education projects. Shared education obviously forms an important pillar of the Minister's policy for community relations, equality and diversity, and I think it's important to see it under that umbrella term also when everyone looks at the definition that we've just provided. A Ministerial Advisory Group was established in July 2012 to inform the Minister's decision on how best to advance shared education at that time. And their report, which drew on the experience of existing shared education projects, was published in March 2013, and it contained 20 separate recommendations. In accepting the report at that time, the Minister encouraged a public debate as to how best to advance shared education. Then, after a period of reflection, the Minister accepted the recommendations of the report in his 22nd of October statement to the Assembly. And just to say that work to take forward the recommendations has been ongoing across various teams within the Department. Our Directorate then is coordinating this work, as well as delivering on some of the specific recommendations. You will have received a paper in advance of this morning's briefing that outlines the current position against each of the 20 recommendations. So I don't intend addressing each of these, but it may be useful to provide a summary of the key actions in which members will have an interest, given your planned inquiry on shared and integrated education. So a number of the Ministerial Advisory Group's recommendations were made in the expectation that the Education and Skills Authority would be in place. That would have ensured a central focus on shared education. In the absence of ESA, then, the recommendations will be addressed in light of the Minister's proposal to replace the current 5 education and library boards with a single board from April 2015. In the interim, the Minister has made it clear that he expects education and library boards to take a consistent regional approach to encourage and facilitate shared education. So turning to the recommendations then, and firstly funding for shared education. And in accepting the Ministerial Advisory Group's recommendation that provision needs to be made to address the additional cost to schools engaging in shared education, which is recommendation 3, the Minister has indicated his intention to mainstream funding in the longer term. While the Ministerial Advisory Group recommended a shared education premium within the common funding formula, the Minister has reserved his position on whether this is the most appropriate way to fund shared education. The Minister has previously indicated that discussions were ongoing with OFM, DFM and the Atlantic Philanthropies to establish a shared education programme that would provide funding for schools to embed shared education. The Minister has indicated that he will use the shared education programme to determine how best then to mainstream shared education funding for schools. Work on that programme is at an advanced stage, and it is expected that an announcement will be made over the coming weeks that would allow funding to commence early in the 2014-15 academic year. And I will brief the committee later on the detail of this programme. The programme, which will be delivered through the Education and Library Boards, has been designed to address a number of the Ministerial Advisory Group recommendations. And these include, firstly, encouraging and facilitating shared education, which is the Ministerial Advisory Group's recommendation 2. Supporting the early and continuing professional development of teachers that encourages its delivery through shared education, and those are recommendations 6 and 7. Evaluation by the Education and Training Inspectorate, which will facilitate the sharing and dissemination of good practice. Recommendations 4 and 5 refer to that. And how best to engage with and meet the needs of parents, caregivers and pupils. And those are referred to in recommendations 9, 11 and 14. The programme will provide an opportunity to trial practices and approaches which will facilitate the longer-term direction of work in advancing shared education in respect of other relevant bodies. So again, as with schools, opportunities will be taken here to see how this pilot work can actually influence the work of the Education and Library Boards and the Education and Training Inspectorate. Turning briefly then to Piece 4. Members will be aware that proposals for Piece 4 include a significant investment in shared education, and discussions are ongoing with the Special European Union programme body as to how Piece 4 funding for advancing shared education can best be used, and that's obviously still subject to the outcomes of their public consultation. And again, I'll provide the committee with more information on this later. In terms of legislation for shared education then, 3 of the recommendations, and those are 1, 12 and 13, related to legislation for shared education and to designating schools as public authorities. And again, it was intended that these would be taken forward via the draft education bill, but in the absence of the bill, the Minister is considering other alternatives, including the possibility of bringing forward a standalone bill to define shared education. And the Education Committee, of course, will be briefed on this at the appropriate juncture. The legislation for schools and other educational institutions to be designated as public authorities is one for OFM DFM in the first instance. So the Minister will be writing to the First Minister and Deputy First Minister to communicate the detail of the recommendations and to seek their views on the practicalities of designating schools for Section 75 purposes. To assist in this process also, the Department is undertaking a review of approaches to equality legislation for education settings in other jurisdictions. So that work is ongoing. Turning to teacher education, and 3 of the Ministerial Advisory Group recommendations, and those are recommendations 6, 7 and 8, were related to teacher education. And as part of the work to finalise a new teacher development strategy, the Department will ensure that this includes provision for teachers to learn together and preparation for teaching in a shared education setting. Account will also be taken of the outworking of the independent review of the teacher education infrastructure, which was commissioned by the Department for Employment and Learning and which was published yesterday. Turning then to area planning and the role of area planning in delivering shared education solutions. Committee members will wish to note that area planning terms of reference and subsequent guidance already encourages shared education options to be brought forward. And a prerequisite for any shared model is that any proposal must have the support of its community, be sustainable and capable of delivering high-quality education. And this morning you've already received a separate briefing on the Shared Education Campuses programme. Consequently, I don't plan to say anything additional on this other than that this will complement the work on advancing shared education by targeting those infrastructure projects aimed at improving or facilitating sharing initiatives within local schools. In addition, the Minister has indicated his intention to bring forward guidance on sharing options for schools and communities. This will be in the form of practical advice on implementing types of shared education models. So a number of schools have expressed interest in a jointly managed model, and that is one which would provide shared education within a Christian ethos, in a school managed by a joint Board of Governors, representative of the two main communities. Positive discussions have been ongoing with the Transferors Representative Council and Catholic trustees regarding the potential for this model. And it's anticipated that the guidance will be published during the period of your inquiry. Turning briefly then to integrated education, as the committee's inquiry will address both shared and integrated education, it may be helpful for me to say a few words in relation to integrated education and how it aligns with shared education. So shared education by definition involves schools and other education providers of differing ownership, sectoral identity and ethos, management type or governance arrangements. So in short, what I explained in more detail at the beginning of the briefing. The level of sharing across schools is at different levels along a continuum, where integrated education should be at the upper end of that continuum. As with schools of any other management type, integrated schools will be expected to partner with a school of differing management type in order to meet the programme for government commitment. This will provide opportunities for sharing the good practice that has been developed within the integrated sector and also provide collaborative opportunities that can equally benefit pupils attending integrated schools. So I trust this provides members with an overview of our work to progress shared education, and obviously we're very happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Christina. Just a couple of things in clarification. Whenever the department talks about management type, it doesn't include FE, because I worry that there is a risk that we have this very defined view of what shared education is, that it's only about getting two different religious traditions together, namely Roman Catholic and Protestant. But shared education, for me, is more about the types of schools, because we have all ability schools, we have grammar schools, we have integrated schools, we have single-sex schools, we have further and higher education. And when you look at area planning, there's a shambles in terms of the way in which there's an area plan for post-primary provision, and FE in some places is outside the loop or is not involved, and it's, you know, FE's doing their own thing in my own area. FE's going ahead and deciding to spend pounds and are pulling out of areas and leaving the entitlement framework having a deficit and all of that. So is there an expansion of the remit of shared education to include FE?
In relation to the FE sector, the Ministerial Advisory Group report specifically mentioned the FE sector. As you know, that's not the responsibility of the department. But we will be engaging with our colleagues in DEL. In fact, we've had some preliminary engagement, but we need to have further engagement over how we make sure that there is some sort of alignment. But as regards how it is rolled out, that would obviously be for the Department of Employment and Learning rather than ourselves, but it is included within the Ministerial Advisory Group recommendation.
Yeah, and obviously the two ministers have met and discussed this issue, and I welcome the fact, Christina, that you made reference to the announcement of the DEL Minister yesterday, maybe it was, in terms of the initial teacher training, because clearly there's an area where if shared education is to mean anything, it has to commence in our facilities which currently train our teachers, where they currently have the CRED programme. There is work and collaboration, but it's quite clear from the comments in the House on Monday that there are some who believe that we should still have a segregated teacher training provision in Northern Ireland and support it. But yet, when it comes to this issue, they want to talk about shared education and how we can collaborate. I want to ask a question, because in the ministerial report, obviously recommendations 18, 19 and 20 were not accepted by me nor my party, nor will be. That's for others to decide how. That's not a committee view. It's a personal view. If the minister is bringing forward proposals in relation, and he has accepted the recommendations in their entirety, what work's being done on recommendations 18, 19 and 20 that we should be made aware of?
Well, you do have the paper that we sent to you,
Yes.
which explains the Minister's position on that.
Yes.
And obviously,
Okay.
Andrew, if you want to share
I
that,
mean,
I have it here, but I'd have
The
to...
Minister, when he spoke to the Assembly in his October address, made his position clear. He has accepted the recommendations, and in a statement he actually welcomed and endorsed the recommendations, as members will know. But he indicated that until the Assembly ends academic selection, that he will continue to promote all ability skills where academic and vocational learning is the norm, and that's the Minister's position on those recommendations.
I hope that's not code, Andrew, for discriminating against schools which are non-selective.
You know, certainly that's not our intention in terms of something like a shared education policy. I mean, shared education has to be about sharing with all schools.
So how, and this is this is one of the challenges around how we square this circle. Recommendation 16, area-based planning and school estate, says these things are always heavily caveated, depending on who the authors of any report is. Where there's sufficient, viable and consistent parental demand, the Department of Education should actively support the establishment of schools and other education institutions with a particular religious, philosophical or cultural ethos. That happens to be a grammar school. What does the Minister do? Because he set his face in accepting 3 recommendations in the report, which says we should end academic selection, which is basically code for saying you're not be allowed to have grammar schools, although if it suits you to have grammar school in your title so that you'll get funding, then we'll be quite happy to allow you to have that. But if there is, as there clearly is, and I take this as an example, and there's other examples in our educational provision, where there is sufficient, viable and consistent parental demand, how does the Minister square recommendation 16 with his position around only being supportive of and promoting non-selective schools?
The Ministerial Advisory Group, in terms of their considerations, as you know, addressed this because they felt that it was key to part of the whole sharing picture. But, I mean, the Ministerial Advisory Group did make it clear at that stage that those recommendations, while they recognised that they were controversial, they did say that the other recommendations could be taken forward in the absence of those. And we are working on the other recommendations, so I don't see that there would be any impact in terms of those skills. In fact, when we ran the IFI programme, there were skills from across all the sectors, including the grammar sector, being involved in them. Although I will say that in our experience, in some cases it is harder to get. It's actually easier to get Catholic and Protestant schools to share together than it is to get grammar schools and secondary schools.
Yes, but Andrew,
that's our experience to date.
But you're making an assumption that grammar schools are not schools which educate pupils from both traditions.
No,
I would nearly go as far as saying some of the grammar schools are a better example of integrated schools than some of the integrated schools which have integrated across the door. Because if you look at the numbers, you go in a numbers game, the 30% or whatever. I have one voluntary grammar school in my town, and it has over 30% of the Roman Catholic community. And it's more an integrated school than another integrated school which is 6 miles down the road.
Yeah, although this isn't about sort of the integration within the skills. The policy is very clear, and it's about skills across different sectors sharing together.
Yeah.
So there, from that point of view, and I would agree. I mean, we've run the statistics, and we know the statistics in terms of that there are a number of the grammar schools and other schools who would have very representative communities, but they're not in
control
educated
schools. Yes. Yeah. Okay. Joanne?
Thanks, Chair. Can I thank you for your briefing again, Fustini, for a busy morning. I understand that DE will work to develop the role of area learning communities to encourage participation of special schools and pupils with disabilities in shared education. And area learning communities do a fantastic job. So can I ask, what do you envisage the development of this role being?
For special schools in particular. I think one of the pieces of work, and again it would be referred to in the present position with regard to the recommendations, is work that has been ongoing over a number of years between special schools and mainstream schools. And Dr John Hunter, who spoke to the committee 2 weeks ago, would have led work on developing both the projects that allowed the mainstream and special schools to work together, but subsequently also guidance, which we do have a copy of here if you're interested in that, but guidance on how best those partnerships can be developed. And I think the interesting thing when you look at that with regard to mainstream and special school partnerships is actually it's probably good practice for all partnering arrangements. So in actual fact there's very interesting work there, I think, which has been done, and recognition, I think, from the last piece of work, which involved 24 partnerships of special and mainstream schools, recognition of the learning benefits for all of the pupils who were involved in those particular examples. So I think there's really solid work there that has already happened that will allow other schools to build on as this work develops.
I know it's such rewards for both schools, you know, where they gain so much with their collaboration. The withdrawal of entitlement framework, however, funding from schools has hit the ability of special schools in my own constituency to engage in sharing. And can I ask, what specific measures can our learning communities bring forward, and do you plan to provide additional funding to help special schools, because it would be so detrimental to lose that ability to work together? And I know, as I said, speaking to principals and teachers in special schools in my own constituency, they have gained so much, and to lose that's a very real fear.
Yeah, and I think we recognise very clearly that in all of this work at present, there is that need for additional financial support, and in some instances where people have not started their journey, for incentives also, but with that longer term aim of all of this becoming part of the fabric and ethos of all schools. So I think it is important to look at financial or additional financial resources as something which allows those partnerships really to develop in the first instance. What you've described there is obviously where there is a withdrawal of funding. It can almost make people feel like that will come to a stop. I would like to think in the schools that you're referring to, there is now that will engendered to find a way to continue that, and I think within the programmes that we're talking about this morning, and we've made brief reference to them, but we'll talk about them in more detail subsequently, within those programmes there will be clear opportunities for those schools which have demonstrated very clear learning outcomes and benefits for all of their pupils to access that money, whether it's on a school-to-school partnership basis or indeed whether it's on an area learning community basis as well. But I think my one caveat is that that it does need to be about sharing in the broadest sense, in the sense of the definitions that we've provided you with this morning, because it can't just be a replacement for entitlement framework funding. It does need to be something which furthers those learning outcomes that you've described and the benefits you've seen for all of the children
is that
involved.
Willingness to continue. It's just that, you know, the issues around and the funding. So just again, you do plan to provide additional funding to help special schools? I
think what I said in the briefing there is that what we hope to happen is if the announcements that we're anticipating take place, is that we would hope to have that money available to schools early in the autumn term. And I suppose from our perspective it's ensuring that the actions by other people now happen with the speed that they need to happen to allow the schools to progress. So we're ready to go with that.
Great, thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much. And I'm fascinated seeing it all being pushed and working forward. The question I'd asked in the previous two, Faustina, was how are we going to push forward so that every school is looking at all. You mentioned that you're going to produce sharing options at some stage in the future. Will that then go to every school, showing them how to, all the different ways of different?
I think in terms of progressing this, I think the really important thing from an education perspective, first and foremost, is how we build on the successes of work that already happened. And I think certainly you had a briefing on the work of the 22 International Fund for Ireland projects, and in my former role, obviously I led that work for the Education and Training Inspectorate. And what we set out to do at that point in time, and I think which proved successful, was really to try and work at empowering schools with regard to this work, rather than this being something that longer term would continue to be an add-on and a separate piece of work for the schools, because historically that is what has happened. We've seen some good pieces of work begin, but once the funding has been withdrawn, then it becomes something that was almost like a luxury as opposed to an integral part of what the school does. What we tried to do in that work was to work with all of the project leaders and also the schools to try and create a common language of evaluation that all of the participants could share, so that we would build capacity in the system with regard to actually identifying what was good about the work they were doing and where they still needed to travel on that journey towards full sharing, if you want to look at the longer term goal, particularly of even jointly managed schools, as we're beginning to see. So I think it really is about trying to look at our schools, I suppose, are a microcosm of our society more broadly. So all of our schools are at different starting points. And I think it really is about trying to see where the school or where the partnership that we're looking at is at, and trying to encourage those schools to move along what we've described, I suppose, as a continuum to help schools to actually identify where they are. But I would like to think that that is something that we can encourage the schools to do, as opposed to being something which is in some way prescriptive. Because really and truly, I think the Northern Ireland curriculum has all of the elements that are required for shared education, and I think if we can continue to ensure that people are really clear about how shared education can contribute to the realisation of the Northern Ireland curriculum, then we win hearts and minds in that way.
That's excellent. Thank you. And when it comes to the funding of this, I know one school has asked, is the Delivering Social Change budget still going to be part of it as we move forwards in it, in each of the library board areas?
And I think what I said in the briefing there, the Minister has reserved judgment on the whole mainstreaming of the funding, because the Ministerial Advisory Group did actually advise a premium that would go towards that. But again, whatever the issues around the common funding formula, I think the intention of that was really to try and streamline that process. And certainly from my experience working with schools, sometimes the money that was going into schools for separate pockets of work wasn't either always utilised in that way, or alternatively people weren't always clear about the multiple funding streams that were coming into schools. So I think in reserving judgment at this point in time, the intention is to try and see how this work develops over the next 3 to 4 years, and to use that as the basis then of actually doing something that is practical and sensible from the school's perspective, but that also ensures the money is getting to the schools.
Thank you. And if I can touch on something the Chair was talking about, he was saying including FEs. We had a very interesting document from Professors Bora and Knox, I can't remember, it was about 6 months ago, which indicated more sharing between the voluntary schools and the others. Is that within the whole scope of what you're doing at the moment?
Between,
it was
are you
looking
talking
at,
about?
it's just trying to think how to put it. It's your grammar schools where you have suitable people in the secondary schools nearby, creating more sharing between those schools and their own practice.
That would be, I think that would be key to both of the programmes that we referred to this morning, to the DSE project and also to Peace 4. It's fundamental, I think, to the programme that there will be sharing at the level that a school can accommodate, or that the partner schools can accommodate, so that the expectation is, I think, in any of these funding arrangements, that schools will be able to demonstrate clear outcomes on improvement over the period of time that they've been involved. But again, realistic expectations in terms of taking the starting point for each of the schools.
Very good one.
I do think, with reference to FE, I think that we can still do better, of course, nevertheless. I think there is still work to be done there. I think the FE sector has done some very good work in community relations, and I think to broaden the scope of that now to clearer partnerships arrangements between FE and schools in this area is something that we do need to move towards.
Thank you. Thanks for the hard work. Thank you.
Rob.
Thank you, Chair, and thank the members for coming today. I have two questions, Chair, if that's okay. I have to go back to the previous panel that we're in. And Mrs Dobson asked a probing question about encouraging around geographical spread of campuses and so on. And I sought clarification on that and got the assurance that we're not going for geographical spread, but we're going for grassroots initiative, and it's where the schools, the community can support an initiative and that stuff. Yeah. So I'm glad you're reinforcing that is the position also. But in the Minister's statement on advancing shared education on the 23rd of October, he indicates, and it says, to bring forward guidelines on the development of area plans to ensure shared education is encouraged. Is there not a contradiction in terms there that the area plan is being constructed in such a way to encourage, but yet we're actually looking for an ethos of it coming from grassroots initiatives?
I suppose the answer to that is that in any type of work like this, I think you have to approach it both ways. You know, as I said earlier, I think it is important to try and avoid prescription on the one hand for schools, but equally I think that area planning has got to take into account the efficient and effective use of our resources. So I think there is the grassroots work that as you say, will inform the area plan, but area planning in its entirety should include all of the options and the opportunities that are there. And I think to encourage sharing, from my perspective, actually, I don't see it as contradictory, to be honest. I do think that can be facilitated within the area planning process.
I would just be too cynical, would I be, if the dividing line between encouraging and prescriptive, that it's a huge chasm, is it?
Well, we know from experience, obviously having run projects with the IFI over the past 6 years, that we know from experience that unless you have the support of the communities, then it makes it extremely difficult to do that. And when the Minister announced about shared education, he called for communities to bring forward their proposals and their ideas, and some communities have done so. So it is that bottom-up approach. But in terms of the area plans, it also reflects the fact that the area plans need to take into account those proposals coming forward from communities. So again, like Christine, I wouldn't see any contradiction between the two.
I'm glad you reassure me on that, and thank you for that. Can I then, you referred to the arrangements for the management of the shared campus once the model is agreed, right? Will you consider it a campus, even though it may be, one side of the road or the other side of the road? Will you consider that to be a campus? And what does you use the expression a joint board of members in the management of it? What would that actually look like?
In terms of the campuses, I mean, shared education is not
Will it be
just
campuses or campus once the shared?
Right. Well, shared education is not just about those schools that are coming together in the shared education campus. It's about all schools sharing with another school, and those on single campuses are obviously easier to do that because they're located next to one another. So from that point of view, there shouldn't be any difference between the two in relation to the campus.
I think what I referred to was one particular model, which was the jointly managed skills, and that is work that is ongoing, where we have met with the various representatives of the Transferers Council and the Catholic trustees, where they have instigated those discussions. And as I said at that point in time, we're hopeful that that guidance might come to fruition in the duration of the inquiry. But truthfully, what we're trying to do at the moment is to really work through that whole process, because it is a process. I think it's not something to which we would automatically have answers. Otherwise, I suppose we would have been in that space before now. But what we have found is that those discussions are really helpful, both in throwing up the issues that are going to be difficult or complicated, but most importantly, I think, in terms of how we've worked together, a sense that there is a will to overcome any obstacles. And I think that always makes a process one which you believe can come to useful fruition.
If you finally arrive up with 10, would you envisage 10 different management models?
I don't think that, certainly what I was talking about was a particular approach, and I think under the educational campuses, which Dermot has talked about this morning, that would be, I think, down to the bid that will come in for the project in terms of how that will actually move forward. Obviously, at the moment we have Lissanelli under development, and again, in that situation you will have a number of schools which at the moment are independent of each other, but there will be the basics of how just a huge campus will be managed, where there will be elements of sharing. But I think sharing in that sense is something which is defined differently, in the sense that it is how you manage a process, and how far you go along the continuum that we've talked about will be down to the individual schools concerned, I think, then in conjunction with their employing authorities. Obviously, we're keen to push that sharing as far as we can in the interests of children and young people, but I think we have to look practically at what can work for people. So I think it's not a case of that there would be 10 different management types. There may be lessons that each group, as it is established, can learn from each other. Yeah. But technically there could be, but I don't envisage that actually being the case. I mean, I would think that we should be able to accommodate ways of learning from each other, but it is a developing process, and I think all of us have to learn from that process.
I think the key thing for ourselves in terms of this particular programme is that where they are in shared campuses, is that the schools don't wait until they arrive in the shared campuses before they start doing the necessary work ahead of it. So this programme will give those schools that would be moving to shared campus the opportunity to do sharing before they actually arrive on the campus, and resolve some of the issues that might otherwise occur.
And whose responsibility is it to arrive at the management issue? Is it the departments? Is it the schools?
In relation to, if you're talking about the jointly managed schools,
yes.
In relation to that, it would be where 2 or more schools would want to come together, and it would be they would be discussing that model with the boards and bringing forward development proposals on that basis. But the concept that we are talking about is really in relation to a school which would have representation of both communities and the Board of Governors. And you'd be talking of potentially 2 schools of different management types coming together to form a jointly managed school.
Is that concept written down somewhere?
That's what we're working on, and that's what we're working on with the transfers and the Catholic trustees, who I must say have been very supportive of the whole concept, and we're quite clear that they can work together in relation to that model. It came about because there were some schools, but when the Minister invited schools and communities to bring forward proposals, some schools came forward to the departments and said we would like to explore this. So we've been working with those schools, but it's proved to be more complex than originally thought, because it touches on such a wide range of different issues, from admission policy, transport, and basically the guidance that we will be giving is for those schools who wish to look at that, what are the practical aspects that they need to be considering if they're bringing forward that type of model, basically so that schools and communities are fully informed of the issues ahead of their decision.
Sure. May I just ask Andrew if he was able to share that piece of work, even though it is not a completed piece of work at this moment in time, with the committee?
I'm sure we could do that. Yeah.
As long as it's on that understanding that we're still working on it
Yes,
with,
okay.
with the groups concerned, yes.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair.
Sean?
Most of my points have been that, but just one or two. In terms of rural schools, and particularly isolated rural schools, who are keen to promote shared education, what special help has been given to them, or proposed to give to them? What consideration has been given to them?
Well, I think again that will be that would form part of their proposal, in the sense that particularly with isolated rural schools, in forming a partnership with another school, then to articulate what their issues are and how those can be met through the project is where I think we're trying to look at customising any of those partnerships to what the schools actually need in that particular situation. So I think if there is that will to actually work with another school, and there are justifiable reasons with regard to it, the obvious one of transport obviously in schools working together, then that will be facilitated through the programmes that we're talking about, and obviously we can talk in a little bit more detail about that shortly.
And then in terms, you mentioned Piece 4 funding, what consideration has been given to cross-border sharing?
Where Piece 4, as you know, will involve cross-border sharing. We've already had preliminary discussions with the department in the south in relation to those, and indeed, as of this week, we're planning to have further meetings in relation to taking that forward. This is obviously in light of the fact that that Piece 4 is still under public consultation, so therefore, you know, we need to be having those conversations, because their proposals could change as a result of the public consultation. But certainly, we are working with our colleagues in the south in relation to some examples of that. And when we again had the shared education programmes funded by the IFI, we had a number of schools in border areas who were working on a cross-border basis, because geographically that made sense. We had maintained schools in Fermanagh who were working with schools across the border, and a number of different areas. So there are some examples of how that can actually operate.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Okay. In conclusion, in terms of the recommendations that came as a result of the Ministerial Advisory Group, recommendation 12, there is was a recommendation saying that necessary legislation should be brought forward for schools and other educational institutions to be designated as public authorities under Section 75 of the Northern Ireland Act. The Minister has accepted that, and he is now, according to the briefing, he's accepted the recommendation and agrees that schools have an important role in promoting equality and opportunity. The matter of legislation to designate schools as public authorities is one for OFMD-FM in the first instance, and the Minister's right to OFMD-FM to communicate the details of these recommendations and seek their views on the practicalities of designating schools for Section 75 purposes. Has there been approval from the bishops and the TRC in relation to this? Because clearly, if you take the current position that the trustees have in relation to footy, in terms of the Fair Employment Treatment Order, they believe that the element which allows them to use the certificate for religious education falls under that remit. And ironically, the current Minister of Education is the only minister who oversees an organisation which has an exemption from equality legislation. And given all the cries that we hear about having equality and treating everybody the same and so on, how is all that practically? I get a sense that this is shifting it over to OFMD-FM and saying, well, really, equality is your responsibility. We don't want to really get involved in this. But is there buy-in to that idea? What discussions has there been with the managing authorities around the whole concept of designating schools as public bodies in this way? Because that would be a monumental shift in terms of the way in which schools are governed or designated under legislation, maybe?
I'll hand over to Andrew for the detail on that, because obviously it is quite complex. But I think first and foremost what I would want to say is that I think it will be hugely important in what we do to ensure that we look at the practicalities of this, and that we look at what skills are already required to do. And in particular, from our perspective, I think it is looking at the administrative burden and what that might mean for schools. So I think those to me are the areas which are actually key in all of this. And I think in terms of the Office of the First Minister and Deputy First Minister, I think that is observing the protocols of that is the first place and the first port of call that the Minister needs to go to. I don't think it's in any way absolving ourselves of responsibility, because I think really we've got to look at what this will actually mean for schools in terms of how it fits with the curriculum and the curriculum requirements that are already there. And as I said, most importantly, I think the administrative burden, while nevertheless trying to meet the responsibilities that we have. But Andrew can talk about the actual detail of the work that has been done.
I mean, we've largely been focusing on, I mean, as Christine has clearly said, that this will be a complex area, and we have been focusing in terms of trying to understand the administrative burden and trying to reduce the administrative burden on schools, because that was one of the specifics which the Ministerial Advisory Group looked at. They talked about a sort of a light version of the equality scheme. So we've been looking in terms of other jurisdictions, and we have looked to what's the position in England, Scotland, Wales, the south of Ireland. We've looked further afield in relation to the Asian economies, Canada, Finland, all of which have issues. Now, the most common systems are those which are closest to us, understandably, but there have been issues in relation to those individual systems, some of which we have already addressed through the likes of the CRED policy, because in the jurisdiction in the south, one of the issues that they have is around educating pupils for self-respect and respect for others, which is what our CRED policy already does. There are versions of the scheme. England is one model that we have been looking at in relation to the scheme which is there, where schools are required to publish equality objectives and in relation to the equality duty placed on schools in England. So we're looking at those sort of models as well in terms of what is the key. But the other factor in all of this, which also involves the Office of the First and Deputy First Minister, is the fact that the Equality Commission currently has around 200 public authorities listed in terms of their database. If we add 1,200 schools to that, it would obviously have a significant impact on the Equality Commission as well. So therefore, all of those factors need to be taken into account.
Yes, I'm sure it'll be an administrative burden for the Equality Commission if those were placed in their responsibility. So, okay, thank you for that. We will now move into closed session, and we'll bring this part of the public proceedings to a close. Okay, thank you.